It's time for Michigan's newest sports talk show, Mitten Madness.
And here he goes. Defense win championship.
Michigan sports talk from here in Battle Creek. The latest stories, the biggest games, all across the Mitten State.
That's not something to play with.
Streaming live and on demand on the 95.3 WBCK app. Here are your hosts, Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes.
Well, hello and good morning. It is Mitten Madness on 95.3 WBCK. Jacob Harrison all alone today. Da'Jzon had prior engagements that he's seeing to this weekend, so best of luck to him with that. I know that he is a happy man because at the 2025 NFL Draft in the first round for the first time since 2002, his Green Bay Packers took a wide receiver in front of tons of screaming fans, though I will say, as we get into the show, because we are going to talk primarily about the NFL Draft, Green Bay tried to pull out a lot of stops, and I watched the Pat McAfee stream, which was less than ideal, but given circumstances, it was free to watch on YouTube. I like Pat McAfee. That show just gets off the rails. Nonetheless, there was a lot of, I don't want to say propaganda, but a lot of like, oh, Green Bay's doing just as good of a job as Detroit at hosting the NFL Draft. Green Bay's got all this and that and the other, and the fans were loud, and yeah, but the fans were also like shouting profanities all night. It took all they could to not belittle the Bears while they were memorializing one of their greatest players of all time. But nonetheless, here we are. I'm recording just hours after the NFL Draft ended on Friday morning, so obviously not enough information to go off of what's going to happen Friday night in the second and third rounds, which is arguably just as important as what happens on Thursday night in the first round. But nonetheless, I can at least speak to what the Lions have done, drafting Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State. In addition to that defensive line, we'll discuss that as well as what happened in the NFC North with the rivals. And we'll also take a look at the Pistons, who are coming up on a crucial Game 4 after a controversial finish in Game 3, in which Detroit tried their best to come back and win that one, and it just came up short. A lot of officiating errors there in the back end of that game as well. So we'll discuss that as we get ready for Game 4 coming up this weekend. Pivotal Game 4 for them. We'll also have our picks at the end of the show. DJ giving me the selections that he has for this week. A lot of fun games, a lot of playoffs as well in the NBA. You get to a point, I know last week we tried to avoid it. You get to a point where you just cannot avoid it any longer. All right, let's start with the NFL Draft. Fantastic night. I really enjoyed watching this one unfold. And as a Steelers fan, I too was happy to see that they did not take a quarterback there at number 21. But overall, you kind of go through the early stages of the draft and you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Then, you know, stuff kind of goes off the rails pretty early with Travis Hunter going to Jacksonville. Big opportunity there for the Jags. I know Trevor Lawrence needs a weapon out there. They also need help on the defensive side in the defensive backfield. So that one's a lot of fun. And then everything else from there kind of fell into place as teams opted to not move around or trade up. A lot of talented players exactly where they need as far as value goes. One that was a little bit shocking, I think, was the 10th overall selection, even though he's from Michigan. And I know a lot of you guys love this player, Colston Loveland, going to the Bears at 10, was a little bit of a shock over Tyler Warren to the Colts. I know my girlfriend was very pleased with that one. But as the night kind of drew along and you continued to see these edge rushers were not going very often, but they would go every eight or so picks, and 4 go before the Lions get on the clock, including the Atlanta Falcons, who did trade up to 26, including giving up a first rounder, which was a little questionable, I think. But they move up into the first round 2 slots ahead of the Lions to take James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee, who's a raw prospect, but a lot of tangible traits on the field that you really, really like. and the Falcons fell in love with that player out of the SEC, which kind of meant that the Lions' hands were tied as far as what they could add on their defense. Now, I will say there can be some optics to look at and say, well, Jahad Campbell out of Alabama might have been the best defensive player still on the board, as well as Will Johnson out of Michigan, both those players having injury concerns from last year, and that really being the only reason why their value dropped. I think the entire NFL knows that those two players are better than being a late first, and in the case of Will Johnson, being a second round pick, but the value is interpreted through what can you do for me right now, and where is the value in taking you where I'm selecting? Look at the New York Giants. I think they kind of showed exactly how you should approach the draft if you're a team with a significant need at a position that is weaker in the draft class. In the case of the Giants, obviously they're terrible and they pick early in the draft. They take a fantastic edge rusher with a third overall pick instead of reaching for a quarterback. They love Jackson Dart, but Jackson Dart's not a top 5 pick. Abdul Carter is a bona fide top 5 pick, and he's going to have a lot of expectations to match what Micah Parsons does in Dallas, and those are going to be hard to overcome, but you at least know that that guy is worth what you are investing in. And then the Giants come back in late in the first round and pick up the quarterback that they want at the value that he is worth, while also getting in front of some other teams that could potentially also trade up to take the quarterback that they want. You've got to be willing to move around, I think, to get exactly what you want in the NFL draft. Otherwise, you've got to really trust your board to understand, okay, if the guy we love, it does not follow us, then here are our other options. If we don't love those options, here's how we intend to move. And every NFL front office is game enough to understand that, and probably the Lions better than most. Because I'll say this, whatever questions you may have about Tyleik Williams, and if you're a true Michigander and you just hate to see the Lions take an Ohio State player, you got to kind of separate yourself a little bit from the moment and understand that I think that you'll find that maybe the Lions did do exactly what they felt they needed to do with the 28th overall pick, and that was add some beef to the defensive line. Now, with Tyleik Williams, there is some untapped potential as a pass rusher, which is fine for an interior defensive lineman, but you're really hoping that he can just come in and be a serviceable player. You're in the back end of the first round in what many believe is a pretty top-heavy class, especially when it comes to trench players. Like, a lot of trench players went last night for me, Thursday night in the first round. A lot of trench players went in that first round of the draft, but you got to have a sense of value for what you're picking. If you're picking with the 28th overall pick, you're not necessarily looking for that guy to be a superstar right out of the gate, nor are you expecting him to be a superstar 3 or 4 years from now. You hope so. You certainly will take it if they turn into that, but it's not a requirement of the value of the pick. Once you get past, 20, you're kind of into that stage of the NFL draft where you're just hoping that guy pans out for you in some fashion. And I think Tyleik Williams brings a lot to the table for the Lions that they desperately need. They need more bodies on the defensive line. They need somebody who can step in and play well while Akeem McNeil recovers from the ACL injury that he had late in the season last year. He's not going to be ready to go week 1. And you still need bodies to pair with Aiden Hutchinson. I know I've pounded the table for an edge rusher, and there's no guarantee that they're not going to go edge rusher in the second round. There are still some fantastic options, and we'll talk about them in a second. But you need bodies next to Aiden Hutchinson just as much as you need a bookend on the opposite side of him. Even an interior pass rush can still help an exterior pass rusher get the job done. You can take it from me as a Steelers fan. For a long time, it was just TJ Watt and Cam Hayward. You got the interior pressure and the exterior pressure, and you hope something comes together on the outside. But in the meantime, you're able to work with what you have and know that you've got 2 elite options on your defense in different positions, and sometimes that's good enough. Now, I know Lions fans are not looking for good enough. So where do they go in the second round? I'm not really sure, but there are options, and we'll see what they do. Obviously, you already know, but guys like Mike Green and Jordan Birch, JT Tuimoloau, Nick Scourton, Josiah Stewart, like these are all serviceable options to add to the edge rusher room and to compete for an opportunity to brush the passer opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. And whoever that may end up being, and if they were selected at all on Friday, obviously I don't have that knowledge, but I think the Detroit Lions understand that most of the needs are on defense, and to approach that with some urgency in this selection weekend. And I think they're doing just that. So give them some time, and I think they'll be just fine. And I think we'll come away from this draft extremely pleased with what Brad Holmes decides to do all throughout the weekend, because he's pretty good at this. People might look at that Tyleik Williams selection and say, well, why that when you have these other needs? And you had the hometown kid, Will Johnson, right there. You had other options at pass rusher. Why didn't you trade Jamison Williams to move up and to go get an edge rusher that you really liked? Brad Holmes knows what he's doing. People questioned him with the Jahmyr Gibbs and the Jack Campbell selections. They've questioned everything that he has done, and yet the Lions are one of the 3 or 4 premier teams in the NFL. I wouldn't question it too much. I think he might know what he's doing. Let's talk about the other teams in the NFC North. On the other side of the break, it's Jacob Harrison hanging out with you on a Saturday morning on 95.3. We are back here on Mitten Madness, 95.3 WBCK. It's Jacob Harrison all alone today. Da'Jzon out taking care of some business with one of his side projects. So, no, he is a happy man. As I said at the top of the show, the Green Bay Packers selected a wide receiver for the first time since 2002 in the first round of the NFL draft. And they got a fast one, didn't they? They went out and got a 4.2 speed kind of guy from Texas. Now, I will say, this year was a year where I was not able to follow the draft quite as closely as I would have liked. My girlfriend is is graduating college this weekend. We've got a ton of family in town. So I knew I wasn't going to be able to focus in too much past night one of the NFL draft as I usually would. But Matthew Golden is a guy who, yes, had a fine final season with the Longhorns, but he was not necessarily the guy that you thought of in that offense. My mind would first go to Isaiah Bond and some of the running backs on that offense. But when you come to the combine and you run a 4.2 40, that's something that separates Matthew Golden from the rest of the wide receiver room in Green Bay. I try to tell DJ all the time, and he doesn't really take to it. But the Packers don't have an awful receiving room. What they don't have is a true flight number one. Now, watching the Pat McAfee stream of the show Friday night, Mike McCarthy said a lot of very intelligent things, but he pointed towards the Packers draft strategy and the way that they operate their draft board, because obviously he was there for 10 plus years. He understands the operation there, and they're not too different, right? Not a lot has changed in Green Bay outside of, after the Mike McCarthy era. They're still a very consistently run organization, as much as I know you guys don't like them. But they took second-round wide receivers for years and years and years, and a lot of them panned out. One of them turned into the best receiver in the NFL in Devontae Adams, than the way that he was paired with Aaron Rodgers. There is a way to approach the NFL draft that is different than what public opinion might be. And the teams that can get ahead of public opinion and make decisions that are even smarter than what other teams are doing, those are the teams that tend to be successful, right? Well, the Packers haven't necessarily been bad ever. Have they won a Super Bowl in a long time? No. I'd rather not think about the last time they won a Super Bowl. But they've been consistently good, right? They've been contenders. They've been a team that can get into the playoffs and win a playoff game. They know what they're doing, is my point. And taking Matthew Golden, adding him to an already pretty solid wide receiving core that honestly, the biggest issue with Green Bay's receiving core is the fact that none of those guys can seem to stay healthy, right? You've got 3 solid stud receivers who are all within the first 3 years of their NFL careers, and now you add in a 4th, and Jordan Love kind of proved last year that he's the real deal. He can be the future of that franchise, and now you give him a bounty of weapons for him to use. Nowhere else to go but up from here for Green Bay. If you think this Matthew Golden pick will pan out, I will say we've seen a lot of 4-2 receivers get drafted in the first round of the NFL, and they didn't pan out. I mean, you're talking a lot of guys who have come through, and just because they were fast, they were supposed to be something, and they weren't. John Ross the third, I think he was the third. He goes to the Giants, nothing. Darius Hayward-Bay, he goes in the top 10 to the Raiders. He wasn't a 4-2 guy, but he was hella fast for that draft class. Nothing. He made his career off of being a special teams gunner for the Pittsburgh Steelers, not for being a wide receiver. There are many more examples of guys who were just simply fast, who didn't pan out for one reason or another. So I don't think if you're a Lions fan, you should be overly scared of this Matthew Golden selection. A lot of people talked themselves into him being the first receiver off the board just because of his 40 time. Don't listen to people like that. They don't know what they're talking about. He's a first-round talent because of the gifts that he has athletically, but you've got to put the whole thing together. You've got to act, and if you're Matthew Golden, you've actually got to crack the lineup because, like I said, there's 3 solid receivers in front of him already there in Green Bay. So did the Packers appease their fan base at the detriment of their team? That remains to be seen because they also need help in the defensive backfield. They didn't take a corner, and Maxwell Hairston goes a few picks later to the Buffalo Bills. And I don't know if you're going to find necessarily what you're looking for unless you trade back up to get Will Johnson, who is one of the best corners in this draft class, still available on day 2. Now, again, I don't know what happened on night 2, but we'll see how things unfold for them. Elsewhere in the NFC North, I already said it, the Colston Loveland decision at 10, to me, is questionable. Now, I think Colston Loveland is a fantastic tight end, and I think a lot of people head into the NFL draft this year and they look and they saw Colston Loveland and they saw Tyler Warren and they said, well, what kind of tight end do you want? Because Colston Loveland is a better traditional inline tight end than Tyler Warren in some capacities. But Tyler Warren is a guy who can be a absolute game breaker. And the Bears decide to go the Colston Loveland route. And there's no doubt about it in my mind that Ben Johnson looks at Colston Loveland and says, that's Sam Laporta in my offense in Chicago. That's all well and good, but dude, you already had Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet has been a wildly underutilized tight end, but even the Bears recognize that he's a fantastic tight end, and that's why they paid him a buttload of money a year or 2 ago to be that guy. The production hasn't been there because the offenses have been crop, as Pat McAfee would say. Like they've been bad. They've been underwhelming. And even last year where there was some hope early in the season, it's all a schematic thing. It's not from a lack of talent in Chicago. So that being said, I'm always a fan of offenses that are willing to use multiple tight ends, especially when you've already got solid starting wide receivers that you can trust, which Chicago has. Now you have 2 tight ends, both of whom can block, both of whom can catch, both of whom can be extremely productive and be there for a young quarterback who is developing. People have their opinions on Caleb Williams. I don't think he's a bad quarterback, and I don't think he's going to stay a bad quarterback, especially with Ben Johnson coaching him. I do question taking Colston Loveland over Tyler Warren, though. But I'll admit I'm a Tyler Warren stan. When I started to see that the Colts were indeed going to head in that direction, my girlfriend, who is a Colts fan, I had to tell her to come over here and look at this guy who is going to wear your team's colors. Look at this guy who's catching passes in your team's offense and making plays. Tyler Warren is a different beast. I think the Bears missed the mark on this. Because look at the history of top 10 tight ends. You don't see a lot of success in them. I mean, really last year with Brock Bowers was a break from the norm because a lot of the best tight ends in the NFL today were 3rd, 4th, 5th round picks. You do not have a lot of first round picks that are actually in the upper echelon of the tight end group across the NFL. TJ Hawkinson is an exception, but even still, he's a bit underwhelming for a 7th overall pick, if for no other reason than he has struggled to stay healthy for most of his career. But even still, like, keeping him as an exception, like, where else do you go? Because I think Lions fans know better than anybody about the allure of a first-round tight end and it not working out. Do I have to say names like Brandon Pettigrew and Eric Ebron for that point to set in? And do the Bears not look at what their division does and say, oh, well, our division rival tried this and it didn't work. Maybe we shouldn't do it either. It's just a thought. It's just a thought. Chicago, I think they got a great player. I don't know that they got a 10th overall player, and I don't think they got the best tight end in the draft. But that's just my opinion, and it could be completely wrong. It goes without saying when you're talking about the NFL draft. Elsewhere, and finally, the Minnesota Vikings, they go offensive line in the first round of their draft, and they take Donovan Jackson. Another Ohio State pick comes to the NFC North. I think this is a great addition for them. There's only so much that you can get into when it comes to an offensive line pick, especially for a team like the Vikings who are pretty well set up for success. J.J. McCarthy comes in after watching Sam Darnold revive his career in that offense. You don't think J.J. McCarthy has a ton of confidence in stepping into Kevin O'Connell's offense and saying, okay, well, I can do what Sam Darnold did. Come on. I mean, I didn't come in with the same kind of questions as he did. J.J. McCarthy doesn't turn the ball over like Sam Darnold does. He doesn't. He never has. Sam Darnold at USC was turning the ball over like crazy. And when he got to the NFL, a lot of people were confused, like, why does he keep turning the ball over? It's because it's what he does. Even when he's good, it's what he does. Vikings lost a lot of games because Sam Darnold turns the ball over. I shouldn't say a lot of games, but they lost the games they lost because Sam Darnold turns the ball over. J.J. McCarthy's probably not going to do that. He may have a little bit more than you might be used to, but he's going to be fine. And now you add to an offensive line that is bookended by Christian Darrisaw at left tackle, one of the best in the league. You added Ryan Kelly into the mix. You added Will Fries into the mix. Those are fantastic veteran offensive linemen. And now Donovan Jackson gets added to the mix. That offensive line is going to be great. It's going to be fine. The running game is going to get a boost off of that as well. So props to the Vikings for making a solid pick in the draft. All right, we'll take a break there, and when we come back, I'm going to set up and talk a little bit about the Pistons. What happened in Game 3? What do we need to happen in Game 4? The playoffs are here, and the Pistons are looking to advance, but it's not going to be easy. We'll talk about it next here on Mitten Madness, 95.3 WBC.
Detroit sports fans, Wolverines and Spartans alike. This is your sports show, Mitten Madness, with Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes on 95.3 WBCK.
Mitten Madness, 95.3 WBCK. Jacob Harrison here, all by my lonesome. I'm going to talk about the Pistons. Now, you're going to have to bear with me a little bit. DJ is more the basketball-minded guy. Honestly, I'm more the football guy, period. All the other sports, I rely heavily on DJ. So I always appreciate his input when it comes to the other sports, because that's where I really struggle to have a informed opinion on many things, just to be completely upfront and honest with you. So talking about the Pistons is more from a fan kind of optic than a analytical one, which is one that you usually get with me when it comes to football. That being said, there was some controversies there at the end of Game 3 that I know are very frustrating to a lot of Piston fans, and even Knicks fans kind of have a little bit of a gripe, though I don't think theirs is quite as, what's the word? I don't think their gripe is quite as justified. But nonetheless, you come out of a Game 3 and nobody's happy, even the winner. That can breed some interesting tension for a Game 4 back in Detroit, back at LCA, where I think the Pistons feel like they can get this thing done. Tomorrow afternoon, 1 p.m. on ABC, the Pistons will take on the Knicks in Game 4, and they're coming off of a controversial finish in which the Pistons end up with an opportunity to get back in front with about with about half a second left, and it doesn't go their way. Ball doesn't get inbounded, game over, right? But you come out and the Knicks are talking about the Pistons shouldn't have even gotten that opportunity, trying to talk about home cooking with the scorers table, which is not biased in any way. LCA doesn't hire the scoring table. The NBA does. They're non-biased professionals. But you've got a situation where the Knicks are getting some free throws that they shouldn't even be getting in the first place. And all the chaos unfolds, and unfortunately the Pistons fall 118 to 116, and that's after coming back, scoring more than New York in the second half. But the lead was too insurmountable, and the Pistons fall short. Now, here's the thing, is you kind of take a step back, forget about all that nonsense. I think this is what you do. You forget about all that nonsense in Game 3, and you say, okay, Game 1, we got humbled a little bit. We're on the road. Game 2, we go out, we pick up a 6-point victory, we play incredible defense, hold them to 94 points. Game 3, they come to our turf. We are excited to play a playoff game at LCA. And we've got this, what could now potentially be a record losing streak at home in the postseason. We got to break that, right? We already broke a record postseason losing record once this postseason. Let's take care of the other one fell swoop. Let's get it done. I think you look at what the Pistons have in front of them. They have the opportunity to exercise some demons, whether that's Game 3 or just the demons that have existed for the past decade and some change. You got to come out hotter, though. And I think that was, in sports, one play does not determine the outcome. It is a collection of events that lead up to monumental moments like you saw at the end of Game 3, where you open the door for controversy. The name of the game is to score more points. So if you have trailed in total points the entire game, then it's a little bit silly to get caught up in what happens in the final seconds. Because the final seconds, while yes, can determine the outcome of the game, you can't leave it into those situations. It sounds unfair and it sounds dismissive of the situation, but it's the reality of the situation. If you don't screw up the way you screwed up in the first half, you're not in that position. Everything is circumstantial, and especially in sports, you got to come out hotter. You cannot go into halftime down, what was it, 66 to 53 or something like that? You can't do it. You set yourself up for failure that way. So I think, honestly, and without giving away the pick, because this is one of the games that we will pick in the next segment, I think realistically you look at what the Pistons have done all year. You've got to start strong. You've got to. It's been a long season. The Pistons have done a lot to get themselves into this position. They lost a lot down the stretch, though. You can't allow the emotions of the situation to ingrain into your performance on the court. I'm not saying that that's what happened, but look at their record. Look at their record since a 3-game winning streak against the Pelicans, Spurs, and Cavs. 2, 4, 6, 8 losses. 1, 2, 3 wins. I'm not saying like the door isn't closed on the Pistons, but don't get into this mindset of, well, we tried our best and then we got screwed over by the refs in the last second. You don't get screwed over by the refs in the last second if you aren't trailing for the entire game. If you start strong in your home opener against the New York Knicks. The Knicks are a fantastic team. The Knicks are a team that is competitive in these NBA playoffs. They are not a team that you are just going to rush past on your way to the second round. And I think the Pistons understand that. And I think most of the fan base understands that. But just like they did in game 2, you got to come out and you got to punch them in the mouth. You got to take control of the game. Don't let them control it. And then at the end, the officials control it, and you haven't controlled 1 ounce of the game, and now you're complaining about the officials instead of looking yourself in the mirror and saying, we didn't play well enough in the first half to even have a shot. We scored more in the second half than the Knicks, but we also scored just as much as the Knicks in the second half as they did in the first half, which means it was not nearly enough. The Pistons have things that they need to clean up, and I don't think the attention should be poured into what happened in the last 30 seconds of game time in game 2, because this can be a long series, especially if you win game 4. You tie this thing up at 2-2, you're looking at a very strong potential of going 7 games in this first round, which is less than ideal for a longer run into the playoffs, but it is what it is. You take your opportunities as they come to you. Be thankful this is the NBA and you get a 4th opportunity at the Knicks. Even this thing back up. You got to. You can't sit back and let the Knicks come out strong, build a hefty lead, sit on that lead in the second half, no matter how hard you try to scratch back, and then controversy befuddles the whole thing. You can't let that happen. And that's what happened in game 3, and that's how okay teams find themselves eliminated from the playoffs while good and great teams advance further beyond. The Knicks are kind of a team that has already proven themselves to be a good team. Pistons are trying to prove themselves to be that. They got to take their opportunities and run with them, and they get one tomorrow afternoon. Hopefully they do what needs to be done. All right, we'll take a break there, and when we come back, it will be time for our picks. Biggest games of the weekend coming at you next here on Mitten Madness, 95.3 WBCK.
95.3 WBCK.
All right, we're back here on Mitten Madness, 95.3 WBCK. Jacob Harrison going it alone today. One more segment on a lonely Friday recording morning. DJ's out handling some business with a side project, but I've got his selections for this week's games. We've got 6 games to choose. I will say DJ is the one who keeps up with the week-to-week tally, and through no fault of his own, I didn't ask for it in time. We don't have the updated standings, though from last week I was a couple of games up. I imagine I'm still in the lead in some capacity because I think we picked all of the games the same last week. We'll see if that will happen again this week, as we've got some UFL and Tigers game and some NBA playoffs to get into. We'll start with the Panthers and the Battlehawks. The Michigan Panthers are going to head down to St. Louis to take on the 2-2 Battlehawks out of the XFL. Obviously, the Panthers are on the USFL side of things, so not much here to go off of as far as like implications, but it should be a fun game between two of the teams that are close to each other here in the Midwest in the league. And the Panthers are a 2.5 point favorite, but that doesn't matter to DJ. DJ is going to say caca and take the Battlehawks. I'm going to actually disagree with him. The Battlehawks have struggled recently. They got blasted by the Renegades last week. They also lost in week 3 to the Defenders. They have struggled against the best teams in the UFL. It's very possible that they're going to struggle against the Panthers as well. So I am going to take the Panthers, and DJ will take the Battlehawks. So we're already different on one game. Let's get to game 2. The Defenders taking on the Renegades. Both teams 3-1. The DC Defenders come in as the road team. The Renegades being the favorites. Arlington is a 3.5 point favor. And DJ is going to take the road team on this and stick with the Defenders. This game Sunday on ESPN, and I think the Renegades will pull that one out. I'm going to stick with Arlington and go with the hometown team. So we're split on 2 games right off the bat. Then we get to the MLB. The Detroit Tigers next week will have a midweek series against the Houston Astros. This one is on the road Monday through Wednesday, 2 primetime starts at 8 p.m. in those first 2 games. The third game is the one that will be televised. It'll be on the MLB Network. However, we don't know who is going to be on the mound for game 3. Usually that would be Mize in the rotation, but he is not there on ESPN. Houston does have Wisniewski there for game 3. But Flaherty and Olsen will lead off games 1 and 2. DJ is going to stick with the Detroit Tigers to win this series, and I think I'm going to do the same. They've only lost 2 series so far in the season. I think they're going to pick up this weekend series here against Baltimore. Will not be easy by any stretch of the imagination, but I think the pitching rotation is kind of playing into their favor here. Plus, they're at home where they have been very, very strong all season long. I do think the Tigers need a solid road series win, and I think that's what they can get here against Houston, and we'll see how it goes. It will be interesting to see. Obviously, Skubal's not going to be in the rotation against Houston, so picking up that win on the road might be a little bit more difficult, but we'll see what's going to happen. Then we head to the NBA. We've got 3 NBA playoff games to get into here. The first, of course, being the Detroit Pistons taking on the New York Knicks. This is game 4 in what could be a 7-game series if the Pistons can pick up the dub, and boy, do they need it. You can catch the game tomorrow, 1 p.m. on ABC. Detroit is a 1.5 point favorite. In case you're curious, the over-under is 216 points, which I believe they have hit the over on at least a couple of times so far in this series. DJ is going with the hometown team. He wants to see Detroit tie it up, and I want to see the same as well. I'm going to go with the Pistons, and hopefully they can even this thing back up. Like I said, you got to come out fast. You got to come out strong. You can't let the game get away from you. And that's what happened in game 3. You can complain about the controversies of the finish if you want to. Obviously, you had an opportunity to win there. And, you know, you can complain about the officiating, but the officials didn't throw the ball out of bounds when you had an extra opportunity to tie the thing up or win it in regulation. The Pistons, there was an old saying about Bret Hart when Shawn Michaels screwed him out of the WWE Championship in the 90s, and it was that Bret screwed Bret. The Pistons got in the way of the Pistons. I'm not going to say they screwed themselves. Obviously, they're not out of this thing yet, and they can grow from it. And hey, you got to go through bad times in the playoffs to learn what the good times are like. But they got to get out in front. They got to start stronger, and they got to pick up a dub here at home and break that near record-setting losing streak at home in the postseason. If they lose this one, they will set an NBA record. Then we're going to head to Game 4 with the Clippers. Next up, we got Denver. They are heading out to LA for Game 4 in their series, where the Clippers do lead 2-1. LA is a 6.5-point favorite. That's how out of hand this thing is getting. I will be upfront about this, so if DJ ends up wanting to change his pick, I will give him the opportunity to do so. I told him it was Clippers at Nuggets, not Nuggets at Clippers, but this game is tomorrow, is later tonight at 6 p.m. Game 4 in the Western Conference playoffs. DJ did take the Nuggets in this one. I am going to take the Clippers, and again, I'm going to give DJ the opportunity to potentially change that pick if he feels it is necessary. But Denver's got to have this one if they want any shot whatsoever. Obviously, you can't go down 3-1 to the Clippers in this situation. Game 5 will be back in Denver, but by then it could be too late, and I think it will be the Clips pick up the dub here, in my opinion. Last one of the week, the Lakers get the T-Wolves. This one is tomorrow at 3:30, also on ABC, immediately following the Detroit Pistons game against New York. This is Game 4 in the series as well. Now, obviously, Game 3 is on Friday, and I don't have any inclination as to what happened in that game. I'm recording well before that game takes place. But nonetheless, I think you look at this series and you look at what the Lakers have done, not just in the postseason, but since they got Luka. It just seems hard-pressed to imagine a scenario in which the Los Angeles Lakers are not playing, at least in the Western Conference Finals. Losing a game in this series is not the end of the world. I'm with DJ on this one. Game 3 is going to go to the Lakers, and it will not be long before they are up and out of round 1 to move on to the next. All right, that's all we got to wrap things back up. DJ and I are split on the UFL games. I've got the Panthers, he's got the Battlehawks, and then I've got the Renegades, and he's got the Defenders. In the MLB, we've both got the Tigers winning a road series against the Astros. And in the NBA playoffs, we are almost at a consensus. We both picked the Pistons. We both picked the Lakers. However, we are split. I say Clippers win at home, and DJ's got the Nuggets. But again, I'm going to give DJ an opportunity to maybe change that pick because he was told that the Nuggets would be at home, and that is not the case. But that is going to wrap things up for this edition of Mitten Madness. I appreciate you hanging out with me today, and hope you appreciated a little bit extra of the draft analysis. I know maybe the NBA analysis, not exactly what you're expecting, but we make do with what we've got. Be excited to have DJ back in the studio next week to continue to discuss what is going on in the world of sports. And hopefully we're continuing to discuss the Detroit Pistons' path through the playoffs, the Detroit Tigers, and their continued success early in the season, and get a full scope of what happened in the NFL draft. We'll do that next week, 10 a.m. Friday, right here on 95.3 WBCK. For Da'Jzon Hughes, I am Jacob Harrison. Y'all take it easy.
Join Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. for Mitten Madness on 95.3 WBCK. Miss the show or want to run it back? Stream Mitten Madness on demand on the WBCK app. Sponsored by airwaycashforjunkcars.com.